Today, on Guess What I Found Out, we are going to talk about the fact that dinosaurs did not go extinct. Some of them are outside your window right now. And, well, the story of how we figured that out involves a Victorian biologist picking fights, a limestone quarry in Germany, a series of volcanic disasters in ancient China, and a small herbivore discovered in Siberia that quietly broke a rule everyone thought was settled. Let us start in 1868. Thomas Henry Huxley, the British biologist best known for being the person who aggressively defended Darwin's ideas while Darwin himself avoided confrontations, was looking at a fossil called Archaeopteryx. It had been pulled from a quarry in the Solnhofen region of Germany, from rock that was roughly 150 million years old. The rock there is a fine-grained limestone, formed from ancient lagoon mud so calm and undisturbed that it preserved the texture of feathers pressed into it like ink into paper. Archaeopteryx had feathers. It also had teeth, clawed wings, and a long bony tail, which are not things modern birds have. Huxley looked at it and said, "That is a transitional form between carnivorous dinosaurs and birds." Everyone largely ignored him for the next 120 years. That is not entirely fair. There was ongoing debate, but the dominant view through much of the 20th century was that birds had some separate murky origin that did not connect cleanly to the theropod dinosaur lineage. And then, in 1996, a farmer in Liaoning province in northeastern China found a fossil that changed everything. Liaoning is sometimes called the feathered dinosaurs Pompeii, and the comparison is accurate. The region sits on top of what used to be an extremely active volcanic landscape. Roughly 125 million years ago, eruptions repeatedly killed and buried entire ecosystems under ash and fine clay. The preservation is extraordinary. You do not just get bones. You get soft tissue impressions. You get the outlines of feathers. You get, in some cases, the actual microscopic structure of pigment cells, which allowed researchers to reconstruct what color some of these animals actually were. The 1996 fossil was Sinosauropteryx, a small theropod dinosaur, and it was covered in what were clearly proto-feathers. Filament-like structures, more like down than flight feathers, running along its body. Skeptics initially argued these might be collagen fibers from decomposing skin. Then researchers analyzed the fossils under high magnification and found melanosomes, the microscopic cellular structures that produce pigment, arranged in patterns specific to feathers. Sinosauropteryx was not a freak. It was the first confirmed example of a feathered non-bird dinosaur, and it set off a wave of discoveries that has not really stopped since. If Sinosauropteryx was a revelation, Microraptor was a full rewrite. Microraptor was a small theropod from the same Liaoning deposits, and, well, it had 4 wings, not 2, 4. Its hind legs were covered in long asymmetrical flight feathers, the same kind of feathers you find on modern birds. You know, the kind where one side of the feather vane is wider than the other, which is what generates aerodynamic lift. It almost certainly glided from trees, rather than running and flapping from the ground, which mattered enormously for the debate over how powered flight evolved in the first place. The trees-down model, where gliding ancestors gradually developed more sophisticated flight, got a lot of support from Microraptor. The animal also had claws clearly adapted for climbing, and the forests of Liaoning at that time were dense and fertilized by the same volcanic activity that kept killing things and preserving them. Anchiornis was another 4-limbed glider, slightly older than Archaeopteryx, which itself caused a small crisis. If Anchiornis at 160 million years ago predates Archaeopteryx at 145 to 150 million years ago, then Archaeopteryx was not the beginning of the bird lineage. It was a branch within a larger, older, already diversifying group of feathered animals. The tree got a lot more complicated. Here is the part that should stop you for a second. If you think dinosaurs were scaly, you are picturing the wrong animals. Based on the fossil evidence we now have, feathers appear to have been widespread across theropod dinosaurs, which is the group that includes the ancestors of birds, but also animals like Velociraptor and Tyrannosaurus. Eutyrannus was a feathered tyrannosaur. It weighed about 1.5 tons and was covered in long, dense feathers, probably for insulation. Caudipteryx had symmetrical display feathers, used for courtship. The feathers we think of as being for flight were a later specialization of structures that originally evolved for completely different purposes: warmth, display, species recognition, and possibly covering eggs while brooding. If you have been watching Guess What I Found Out for a while and have not hit the follow button yet, right now is an excellent time. This is the kind of content we do here. The insulation case is worth dwelling on because it overturns another assumption. The Cretaceous is often depicted as a uniformly warm, tropical world. Liaoning was not that. Oxygen isotope analysis in the teeth of theropods from that region indicates temperatures similar to or colder than modern northern Europe. Harsh winters. Snow, possibly. These were not animals lounging in perpetual warmth. They were warm-blooded, metabolically active, and they needed feathers to stay that way. The feathers came before the flight. Now, here is where it gets philosophically interesting, and I want you to drop your answer in the comments below. Drop a comment telling me which of these two scenarios you find harder to believe, that a velociraptor had feathers, or that a chicken is technically a dinosaur. Because both of those statements are true. And, well, one of them is going to sit wrong for almost everybody. Then, in 2014, a discovery from Siberia made the situation even stranger. Culindrodromeus zabai-calicus was a small, fast, herbivorous dinosaur found in the Kunda fossil deposit near the Siberian border with Mongolia. It was not a theropod. It was an ornithischian, a completely different branch of the dinosaur family tree, the branch that includes Triceratops and the hadrosaurs. And it had proto-feathers, composite filament structures converging at the base, primitive but unmistakably feather-like. This is significant because it pushes the origin of feathers back to a common ancestor of both major dinosaur lineages, which means we are looking at a trait that emerged roughly 220 million years ago, in the Triassic, before the dinosaur family tree split into the branches we recognize. The implication, which paleontologists are still working through, is that feathers may have been the default condition for dinosaurs as a group, and that the scaly-skinned sauropods and others may have secondarily lost them rather than never having had them. Confuciusornis, also from Liaoning, bridges the gap neatly on the other end. About 125 million years old, it is found in such abundance, over 500 specimens, that researchers have been able to study it the way you might study a modern bird population. It had no teeth, no long bony tail, a proper wishbone, an ankle adapted for perching, and display feathers. It was doing powered flight, probably clumsily by modern bird standards, but it was doing it. It sat between the four-winged gliders and the fully modern birds in a way that makes the evolutionary sequence legible. The pterosaurs, which had ruled the skies for 80 million years before any of this, were on the way out by the end of the Cretaceous. Their leathery membrane wings and hollow bones were a different solution to the problem of flight, and the asteroid impact 65 million years ago finished them off entirely. The feathered theropod lineage survived. Some of them were small enough that the aftermath was survivable. They are now approximately 10,000 species of birds. The next time someone tells you the dinosaurs went extinct, you can tell them that is only mostly true. That is it for today. If you found any of this genuinely surprising, especially the Culindrodromeus part, tell me in the comments. More coming from Guess What I Found Out across science, nature, and wildlife. See you on the next one.